Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Aaron Washington back on the mic here for an episode 146 of the Business Casual Basketball Podcast. Very excited for this episode because I have the genuine pleasure of welcoming in one of the great broadcasters that you guys are going to see and hear as you're watching NBA games this season and beyond. So this is Bob Rathrun, guys. He is the voice of the Atlanta Hawks. Does some great broadcasting work for them. He's been doing it for many years. He's really great at what he does. He's an Emmy award-winning broadcaster. So if anybody out there is looking to get into this field, he's going to have some really great insights for you guys and a lot of great experience that he's going to be able to provide for you guys. And even if you're not, just a lot of great information I'm sure Bob is going to be able to give to you guys today. So Bob, thanks so much for taking the time to join this podcast. I know you're really busy and the Hawks have been blowing up and, you got a lot on your hands as far as broadcasting for this team this season. But in any case, I'm glad you're here and excited to talk some ball with you here this afternoon.
Well, Aaron, it is my pleasure. I'm excited to get to meet you and work with you on this podcast and greetings to one and all. It's a great time of year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is a recognizable voice. I'm sure everybody just listeing, watching this is going to be like, that's the guy from the Hawks, so that's fantastic. I love it. I'm really glad that you're here for sure. So just want to take a few seconds and shout out some of the sponsors we have here for the Unwrapped Sports Network, our podcast. Teespring.com is the site that you guys can go to if you're interested in picking up some apparel, some accessories that we have available for our podcast that we like to kind of promote. Used to promote the podcast and market that a little bit more. So teespring.com/stores/unwrapped is going to be the link that you guys can visit right now to get t-shirts, cup holders, stickers, anything like that that you want to buy to help support our podcast. It's very much appreciated. And that link is going to be down there scrolling at the ticker if you guys want to check out some of our products. Patreon.com/unwrapped sports is where you guys can go. It's another way you can support us if you like. We have three basically categories that allows you guys to get involved with us, varying price points. So if you want to get some exclusive access with us, have some conversations with us, be enrolled in some contests to win some apparel and things like that, some signed memorabilia that's available to you right now if you want to check out our patreon.com link down there at the bottom. MyBookie.ag is where you guys can get involved in the betting games. So if you're trying to make some money this season, you want to bet on the Hawks, you think they're going to go all the way to the finals and make some things happen there, go ahead and get started. USN 100 is going to be the code you guys can use right now to get a 100% sign-up bonus, get your deposit doubled, and start making some money because this is prime time for the NBA playoffs and things are getting into high gear as we speak. And then rxhemp.com is the last one for you guys here this afternoon. rxhemp-USN is going to give you 10% off your entire order. So they have some really good recovery products. If you guys want to get back into the swing of things with athletics, your exercising, things like that, be sure to check out their website for that promo code because that's going to really allow you guys to get back active in sports if you want to rejuvenate and recover as you're kind of doing your exercises or whatever you happen to be doing in the sports world. So now that is addressed here, Bob, let's dive into your career here a little bit as a broadcaster. Really excited to hear your thoughts on this one. Because you've been around a long time. You've seen a lot. You've done a lot in this field. So basically, I just wanted to kind of throw some questions at you, just a quick Q&A to kind of see what you have to say about your career and kind of leading up to the current day with what you're doing here for the Hawks. So basically, the first question is pretty general, just to kind of get things rolling. How did you get involved in the broadcasting scene? What kind of led you to it? Was this a desire that you had from a young age? What kind of brought you to a career in broadcasting?
Aaron, it's all I've ever done. I grew up in a small town, Salisbury, North Carolina. I don't remember what prompted me to do it, but when I was 12 years old, I picked up the telephone and called the radio station in my hometown, told the announcer on duty how much I enjoyed the station, loved the sports, and he said, well, young man, why don't you come down and we'll give you a tour of the station? So my mom and dad take me down. I have a little tour of the station, and it became an every Sunday ritual where I just kind of go down and hang out, take out the garbage, do what 12-year-old kids would do. And one day the sportscaster of the station showed up and he said, well, if you love baseball and sports and you love radio, help us broadcast these American Legion baseball games, which we did in the summertime. And I said, well, sure. So I would keep stats and score and all these things. And one evening he said to me, Are you ready to make your debut? I said, well, I guess I am. I got the mic in the bottom half of the 7th inning of a home game, and I broadcast, and our first baseman hit a home run. I have no idea what I said, but he hit one out. It was the talk of the town, a little small town, this is 100 years ago. And that launched my career, and I've been doing this ever since. Now, I didn't get back on the air, for a long time, but I worked at the station and wrote for the newspaper in town, and that's how I got started. And
awesome.
It was I can't imagine my good fortune back at the time to meet the people I met, to have the opportunity to do it at such a young age and just hang around the radio station. That little station sent 4 major league announcers on their way as a springboard. And so we were around a lot of great broadcasters, and it was a great little radio station. I remember, stuff to this day, jingles and commercials and stuff from that little station. It made such an impression on me because I loved it so much. To fast forward, though, Aaron, to answer your question fully, it's one of the reasons why I try to help as many young broadcasters as I can. I was afforded an opportunity that not a lot of kids get, and I want to go out of my way to help launch careers best I can, to encourage, to see if I can help the next generation come along. So that's very important to me. And thank you for asking, but that's how it started for me back in Salisbury, North Carolina.
That's such a cool story. And just talking with industry experts over the years, it seems to be a recurring theme. They got a big shot somewhere. They got that opportunity to get their foot in the door. And it seems like that's even more relevant in the sports field. Just you have to know people. You have to be able to network well. And sometimes it takes a little bit of luck. I'm sure you can attest to that. An opportunity to come out of nowhere, and you have to be diligent on capitalizing on that opportunity. But that's just a really cool story. I can see the humble beginnings of where you started at. And I'm sure that kind of roots that sense in you. You never forget where you come from. And I'm sure that sticks with you to this day, just thinking about where you came from. So that's an awesome story. A question that kind of goes along with that. I'm sure that, as you're coming up, you saw some people before you that gave you an opportunity, some people that did the work that you wanted to do as you kind of got started. Were there any figures in the, if it's sports or whatever it is in broadcasting in general, that you kind of saw they did things a certain way that really stood out to you, that you kind of took it some bits and pieces of their career? Any influences, any big, heroes in your life that you saw as you were kind of progressing into your career and getting started there?
Well, I will answer that question in 2 different ways, if I could.
Okay.
Obviously, the dog is hungry. If you can hear him in the background. I think, number one, the sportscaster at that station when I was 12 was a fellow who went on to become a Hall of Fame baseball announcer. Did the Cincinnati Reds games for over 40 years. Marty Brenneman did it on the air. Son Tom followed in his footsteps with Fox, etc. But you talk about influencers, and we watched Marty, and Marty was obviously an immense talent. Okay. But it was Marty to us, right? It was
Another
like,
guy.
Hey, it's Marty, but he was great, So we kind of learned by just kind of being around him. And so that was different. My part of that story was a little different than most. Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing that sort of demystified the business for me was again, I go back to my hometown. For years and years and years, it's moved since to Winston-Salem, but for years was the home of the National Sportscasters and Sports Writers Association. And every year they annually had their meeting where they hosted the 50 state winners, best broadcasters and writers, national winners, Hall of Famers, etc., would come to Salisbury. Well, when I got my driver's license when I was 16, I was placed on the transportation committee, which meant you go to Charlotte, pick these guys up at the airport, bring them back to Salisbury. Well, in the back seat of my car, I had, Aaron, the greats of the industry. I mean, big names. It would be like having today, Stephen A. Smith in the backseat of your car, or, Joe Buck or Al Michaels, people of that nature. Now, these names may not mean much to your audience these days, but back then, I mean, we're talking about Chris Schenkel, Kurt Gowdy, Lindsey Nelson, Keith Jackson. These guys were the biggest of the big, and they'd be in the backseat of my car. Wow. Lindsey Nelson worked for CBS forever, did Notre Dame football replays, did the Mets games from their existence. Big time. Did the Cotton Bowl for 1,000 years. But Lindsey's signature statement was to wear outrageous sport coats on the air. Okay. So I've got him in the backseat of my car, and I said, Mr. Nelson, I want to be just like you one day. I want to be a sportscaster. What advice would you give me? He said, well, Robert, if you don't have any talent, make sure you dress funny. And so,
love it.
So, but what it did, Aaron, it dehumanized, not dehumanized, it demystified the business. It made them human. It made them like every other guy. And the big lesson I got was, if you keep your nose clean and work hard, this can happen for you. And that is a message that I try to impart all the time to my young broadcasting students and people who reach out to me to get going in this business. It's not easy. This is a tough business. There's only so many jobs, now you and your generation's coming along at a time where, opportunities are everywhere because there's so much media. It doesn't have to be radio and TV like it had to be when I was getting started, but still through it all, you got to work, you got to pay your dues, and you got to be good at this. You got to be able to speak well and write well. And that's a lifetime journey to do it well. But so I hope that's a very long-winded answer to your question, but I think that's kind of how I got going.
Awesome. I love to hear that. And that's a great segue into my next question. You talked about this current generation having different forms of media available to them. Today, it's YouTube and it's streaming services. It's things like this, like StreamYard, the platform we're on right now, having this conversation. The opportunities are there, and you don't necessarily have to be with the Atlanta Hawks or with a baseball team. It can be something that can kind of start on your own, just kind of in your basement or something like that. I think that's just really cool for people like me that just want to get started somewhere and they don't have the connections, or they don't have the opportunity to do something on a large scale, so they can get started early. But basically, what I wanted to ask you about next is, what are the biggest changes in the industry? I know you kind of touched on this already. It's just the forms of media, but you've been around a long time, and I'm sure that the landscape has changed drastically from when you started. But what would you say are the few things that you've seen change the most? Is it like a certain format of broadcasting maybe has changed, the methods of broadcasting, things that maybe stood out to you as you kind of look back and say, wow, like that is nothing like I thought it would be when I started, or I didn't expect that to kind of develop or come out of the woodwork as I went along. Anything like that stand out to you as you've progressed and kind of gone along?
This thing right here, the smartphone. They had no idea. Yeah, now, when I was broadcasting those American Legion games, okay, to get out of town scores, my buddy, Charles Swanson, who kept my stats for years, would hold a transistor radio up to his ear, if you even know what a transistor radio is.
Sounds foreign to me.
Okay. It was a radio. It's like your phone, only it was a radio, and you'd tune to the radio station and you'd hold it up and listen. And he would listen to the Braves games. And as soon as Milo Hamilton and Ernie Johnson would say a score, he'd write it down and hand it to me. And that's how we got our out of town scores. I can go to that same American Legion baseball game tonight with my phone, and I can watch a game on my phone. Unheard of. Streaming is going to be the way to go in the years to come. The way that our fans are consuming the game is much more trending toward watching it on your phone, watching it on your iPad, what have you, rather than being tethered to a cable or watching it over the air. And that's probably the biggest difference. when I was starting, it was, you had a radio station in your hometown. You at night could listen to all the 50,000 watt stations across the country. And most of them carried sports and ball games. So you could, tune to, WLW in Cincinnati to hear the Reds at 760 or the Braves at 750 on WSB and on and on. Old timers like me, we remember those days where the stations were located. But now, you can do it all on your phone. I can have a crystal clear signal of the Seattle Mariners game on my phone today than ever imagining that I could do that years ago. The internet has changed everything in terms of information access, statistics, trends, all this stuff, the analytics that we enjoy today. None of this existed before. So lots of changes, but I think the technology probably number one. But that said, Aaron, what we do as broadcasters has not changed.
Right.
The medium, how we deliver it has, but the message has not. I still have to communicate. If I'm on the radio, I have to communicate one-on-one with you so you can hear the story I'm telling you, painting the picture of that game. If I'm on television or, however you define TV, streaming or whatnot, I've got to be able to tell that story to supply the proper subtitles and storylines to help you enjoy watching that broadcast. So the role of the sportscaster, particularly the play-by-play guy, has not changed.
Right. That's an excellent point. And I think it just comes down to like your role is the same as it was when you started. And I think it's just really cool to see that there's different ways you can gather information when you're researching for a team and you're trying to gather that. I didn't have this written down, but it just kind of came to mind for me when you are preparing for a game. Let's say it's, Hawks Sixers game 3 for the playoffs, and you're trying to look at some numbers and some analytics and things that pertain to this matchup specifically. Do you feel like it's easier for you? Does it cut down on the time it takes you to prepare for a broadcast? Are you kind of rooted in, the old ways? Do you still like to do things pen and paper, or do you prefer to maybe throw things on a tablet or a laptop? How does that information gathering process go for you in terms of like how it used to be as opposed to now? Anything different in that regard?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's changed. I do a score sheet every game on a laptop. And the service that is provided to me and a lot of the different announcers, the statistics that we get, that we used to have to do by hand that you mentioned, is an automatic download these days. So that saves a lot of time, rosters and numbers and stats. But the research to get the right story, the right numbers, and use them at the right time, that has not changed. We prepare for hours on end, and maybe we'll use 5% of what we've prepared because you never know how the game's going to go.
Right.
I have no idea. Billy Packer, who I used to work with on CBS, used to tell the story. He said, I'm going to broadcast Michigan and Indiana. Okay. I have every newspaper clipping. I have every stat. I've got your media guides. I get to talk to the coaches. I watch both teams practice. I have no idea who's going to win the game, but there's somebody at the other end of an 800 number who does, for these tout services. They go, oh yeah, Michigan's going to win by 7 and whatever. So that I think is what keeps you hungry, not knowing how it's going to go, having no clue, no preconceived notions as to who's going to win, why they should win. Just be a reporter and get out there and be curious as to why it went the way that it went. And that's where your preparation comes in handy.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's just cool to hear you talk about how that process for you, it looks like you have a routine that's set in stone. You go through every game, you don't deviate. But it sounds like there's a lot of commonalities between what happens now and then. You just maybe go about it a little bit of a different way for sure when it comes to the current time. But you've been in the broadcasting booth a long time. You've seen a lot of things have changed. And something that's changed for this season as opposed to last season, we're seeing a guy that is, he was a legend for the Hawks for a few years. He did a lot of great things for this team. Vince Carter, NBA, I would like to say that he's going to be a Hall of Famer one day as a player. but maybe he can be something like that in his current career now, transitioning to a broadcasting role. He's had some appearances for the Hawks. He's been in the booth a little bit with you guys and given his opinions on what he sees in the game today. Maybe give a little bit of what you've seen from Vince so far as it pertains to his broadcasting career, because people like me, a lot of people that looking at him while he was playing said like he is destined to be in the booth. They just loved how he conducted himself, the way he spoke, and they're just saying like he'd be a perfect fit as a broadcaster. And that looks to be the case so far. So what would you say about your experience has been with him so far and how you see him progressing as he continues in the next phase of his life here?
Love Vince Carter. He is just a wonderful guy. Obviously, he's going to be a Hall of Fame player. But, to Vince's credit, he started getting involved in broadcasting the last several years before he stopped playing. Right. I think to a lot of folks, it looks like he just, turned a page and jumped into the booth. But he's been working on this for a couple of years now. And I think he's going to be great at it for all the things that you mentioned. He's personality plus. The first requisite for me is what you're talking about, and he's got that covered. But he also can express it well. And I think the fact that he's not very far removed from playing, he's very in touch with, the younger players, and certainly what's going on in our locker room, because he's been with us the last 2 years. But because he's been in the game for so long as a player, so many of the younger guys look to him as a mentor and a sounding board. And guys that got bounced out of the league, Cameron Payne that you're seeing with Phoenix is a guy that, went to Vince at Vegas a couple of summers ago, was out of the NBA. This guy's drafted, high pick and all that. And what do I got to do? What do I have to do to get back? And Vince is, kind of confidant and stuff like that. So he plays a lot of different roles. All of them lead him to being a great broadcaster. And he's got great stories. He can express himself well. He's just like anybody else. You just got to get in the batting cage and start swinging and get those game reps under your belt and see different things that happen in different situations and how you handle it. But once he gets that down, sky's the limit. He's going to be broadcasting basketball on TV for many, many years.
Oh, yeah. It sure seems like it. Just
if we can get him off the golf course.
Right. I'm sure he's got a lot of different pursuits kind of tugging him in different directions now that he doesn't have to devote himself to playing every night.
You don't touch the golf game. You don't do
exactly. 100%. Yeah, he's a great personality. I love hearing him in the booth and seeing him. And I'm sure it's really cool to get that unique perspective from somebody that just finished playing the game. That's fresh in his mind. He can kind of tell the listeners, people that are watching, like what it's like to be in the shoes of a player, because he was just there just recently. So for a guy like Cameron Payne, that's really cool that, he still has that expertise to offer him. And, I'm happy for him as well. I actually was at Summer League a couple of years ago and I saw Cameron Payne and I got his autograph and, I was rooting for him. So it's really cool that we still have these guys kind of doing the role, serving the role that you do as a broadcaster. They're doing it from the player side, just kind of ushering in this next generation, giving them tips and pointers to help them progress in their career. They're paying it forward, which is really cool to see. But one last, I guess this is the last question for this segment here, for people that are listening or watching this, that are curious to kind of find out what it takes to be in this field. You touched on one of the points already. That's just hard work and, putting your nose to the grindstone and continuing to develop your skills. Anything else that you've have to offer people that are watching or listening to this that want to get a start in broadcasting and they're just looking for a place to kind of start and kind of get their foot in the door?
There's so many things come to mind, but I think number one, the people who make it in this business, and I say make it, you make it your career, no matter what the level, is that you've got to have that burning desire to do this. If you don't have that fire in the belly, really for anything that you do, but particularly in broadcasting, it's hard because this is tough work. These are 18-hour days, and when you're just getting started, low pay. But I would say the two things that I would always go back to, even if I were to start over again, and this is what was drilled into me, to be good at sportscasting, there's two things. You've got to speak well and you've got to write well. And when I say write well, I don't mean so much of a journalism background, although that's important. It's writing for the ear. You know, play-by-play, we have no script. So that's a different deal. But that's a small portion of television and sportscasting. Much more is anchoring, is doing a radio show, being a reporter. And these really draw upon your writing skills. So I would learn how to write well. And to write well, you got to be a great reader. Okay. So studying, the books and, being a student, being dedicated to getting information, learning stories, learn how to tell stories, and have a way to record that information. Okay. So you can use it at the right time. I pull stories 365 days a year. I never know if I see something on the Utah Jazz, I throw it in a Jazz folder. Maybe I'll use it, maybe I won't, but I've got it. And the other thing about speaking well, this is another lifetime pursuit. This is not something you learn once and you got it. It's something you've got to work on all the time. To speak well, you've got to learn how to use your voice. You've got to make it a solid voice, a strong voice. If you're not happy with your voice, go to a voice coach. If you're in school, get on the debate team. Take some beginning acting classes. Learn how to use your voice, because once you get on camera, those skills will come back and help you a great deal. So I think there's a lot that goes on, but I think those are the two big things.
That's excellent advice, Bob. I'm really glad that you offered that. I've actually experienced some of that in my experience just doing this podcast for 3 or 4 years now. And there's certain things you pick up on, especially if you're going to go back and look at where you start to where you're at now, and the different things you pick up, and different things as far as like your voice and all that. It's definitely a process, but like you said, it's a lifetime pursuit. You never really get it and you're done. It's just something you're going to carry with you your entire career.
Just the challenge of speaking in complete sentences.
Oh yeah.
It sounds simple, right? But it's a little harder than you think. And particularly if you're in play-by-play or color or sideline reporting, when you really don't have a script, that's why you have to practice over and over and over. One of the great lessons I learned was from a person who was a salesperson and who had a great repartee with the customers and a great presentation, had great presentation skills. And I said, what's your secret? What's the deal here? This looks too good to be true. He said, I found that in my rehearsal, I would do it 21 times.
Seems like a pretty specific number there that he found.
So after 21, I had it down. Now think about if you're giving, Aaron, let's just say you're giving a 2-minute sportscast. Let's just say something, okay?
All right.
Do you have the personal discipline to write it and rehearse it 21 times before you give it?
That takes some dedication right there.
Yeah,
that's
maybe
serious
maybe
discipline.
But I'm just saying that's the mark of a pro. That's the mark of someone who works on their craft. Now, it may be 15, it may be 50, but there's a number out there that's going to take you from a place of low competence, low confidence to the other end, to where you could do it in your sleep. What's that number for you? And that's one of the keys to being a pro, I think.
Absolutely. It's the saying is out there, and data supports this. To be an expert at anything, 10,000 hours of practice, and I'm sure for this field and other fields, it's probably even more than that. But you got to start there, and you really got to put your time into it. So that's some great advice, and I would support that 100%. So as we transition to this team now, we can get a little more specific. This is a team that you call. You've been doing it for a long time. You kind of seen people come and see them go. But we're kind of getting into this new era of Hawks basketball that's just incredibly exciting to watch and just be a part of. And this team has really gelled together, and it's a product of the development that we've seen over several years here now after that kind of last generation with like Millsap and Horford kind of gave way to Trae Young and John Collins and these guys. But I just wanted to start with just some developments from this season, just some things that you've noticed that were a little bit surprising. I know for myself, I didn't expect all the pieces to fit so well so early. All these guys trying to vie for playing time. You bring in Gallinari, you bring in Bogdanovich and Capella. It's just a lot of guys that I thought would kind of be looking for their own opportunities, but they've worked so well together just in their first year together. So maybe there's some things that stood out to you as you call, the games for this team, and you've seen them grow together from the course of, December all the way to today. What has stood out for you about them? What kind of strikes you about this team that makes them special and capable of maybe even making a conference finals here in just a week or two?
Well, there's certainly no substitute for talent. I mean, that's
Facts.
number one, right? And these cats, Bogdanovich is 28 years old and, has played at the highest level overseas in Europe. What a blessing to have him and locked up for years to come. Same for Capella, same for Gallinari. These are world-class basketball players, and we haven't had that kind of talent around here from top to bottom in a long time. Mm-hmm. Good young talent with Trae and Herter and Collins, etc. But the man who tied it all together was Nate McMillan. I don't know that all this happens without a coaching change. And that's not to say that it couldn't have happened under Lloyd, but it wasn't happening for whatever the reason. And Aaron, this year was different for me because I wasn't allowed to be around them and travel and be at practice like I normally would be. So I'm kind of, detached a little watching this, but the results speak for themselves. I mean, we've got the best record in the Eastern Conference since they took over. That's better than Philly, better than Brooklyn, better than all these teams. And it's not a fluke. I mean, this is a veteran coach who knows what he's doing. And he just seemed to galvanize all this talent. He always talks about the fist. And it's a story that I use a lot in my motivational speeches. I tell my audiences, if you think of this as a basketball team and you've got 5 guys, well, with the hand spread, they can only be so effective if they're looking to punch at you. Okay.
Right.
But if I come together and make that fist and then I hit,
do a lot of damage,
much more of an impact. And that's what you're seeing with the Hawks. Nate has been able to get them to thinking that 5 as 1 is the way to go. And you see it at the defensive end. I don't think especially when Hunter was playing versus the Knicks, I don't think I've seen us as connected defensively as we were for those 5 games.
100%.
And all to Nate's credit. This is a guy who knows what he wants. If you don't want to play it his way, you can sit on the bench. And I wanted to jump through the Zoom machine and hug him when at his introductory press conference, he said, he was asked the question, well, you got a lot of guys hurt. And then when they come back, you're going to have like 10, 11, 12 guys that you can play. How are you going to fit them all in? And he paused and he said, their job is to please me, not for me to please them. And I just wanted to go hug him. Like, yes, this is exactly what this team needs to hear. We're going to do it my way, meaning Nate's way. And if you don't get on the train, we're leaving the station. And I think that's one of the big reasons why we've been so successful.
Man, I love that. I love that quote that he brought in there. He's one of those coaches that you got to put your foot down. You can't be a pushover because the players are going to seek out that weakness and they're going to jump on you. So Nate set out the goal from the opening tip, and I think that's why they've been so successful, just like you were mentioning. But, looking at this team, I'm sure that right now it's such a joy to call this team because they're surprising, they're energetic, they're fun, they're talented, as you spoke to earlier. But we went through some years just, recently, probably 2016 to up until, this season where it wasn't so peachy and rosy. We had some ups and downs, and, Trae Young was labeled as this guy that just hunts for his own numbers, but he's on a losing team. And a lot of different narratives out there about the Hawks, a lot of them negative. Have you found that in down years when the team is struggling, they finish 12th, 13th in the Eastern Conference as opposed to 5th where they were this season. You know, it was a little bit more difficult to usher up that energy, the enthusiasm, find some things to talk about. When it's not winning, it's more about the losing for a lot of people. How do you feel that changes from season to season as you call a team, they go through ebbs and flows of their development?
Yeah, we sort of saw this one coming because the blow up of what we had going through the draft, you know, taking all these assets for 3 years really to make this happen, to not only get a core group that we can go forward with and win, but also create enough salary cap that we could have the summer like we had last summer, to bring in, you know, Gallo and Bogey and all these guys. So a lot of pain, a lot of growing pains. And you just have to step back and realize we're going to have to go through this. And you get through it best you can. I've been around long enough that I've been through a couple of rebuilds, so I knew what was coming. It's tough because you never quite know when it's going to end. I think this rebuild was faster and better than just about anyone I've seen in a long time, other than, you know, drafting LeBron or somebody like that. So kudos to Travis, kudos to ownership to make this happen quickly. But we're on our way now. We've got what we need. We've got enough guys around them. You know, if we had DeAndre and Cam, I think how deep we'd be. The sky's the limit. You know, let me ask you this. Who do you think has a brighter future? The Lakers, the Celtics, or the Hawks?
Wow, that's a great question. I mean,
right? It ain't even close.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to zoom out to 5-10 years, and it's definitely the Hawks.
Franchises in Boston and Los Angeles that have dominated winning NBA championships over the past 75 years. So the Hawks are in a great place. The city's in a great place. And this is just the beginning of a lot of fun times.
It is. It really is. The fans are loving it. I'm sure when they come back for tomorrow's game, they're going to be just hyped up and energetic.
It's going to be lit.
It's going to absolutely lit. It's going to be just blowing the building apart. But if we're looking at this, I guess we could fast forward now to the series against the Sixers. You know, we're talking about, you know, we're just probably 24 hours out now from Game 3, and we're going to be looking at this team to take the court in front of their fans again. And I would love to be there, but, you know, these ticket prices are, you know, just kind of steadily climbing up, and you know, I might have to take a back seat for this season, but, you know, I would love to be in the building because I'm sure they're going to put on a show and really kind of bounce back from that Game 2 loss. But, you know, looking at their odds in this series, if we're really trying to extrapolate this performance and look at how they're going to do, I'll be honest, I gave the Sixers the edge in this series. You know, Embiid is a monster, and they have a lot of defensive pieces to throw at Trae Young, and we saw that last game with Ben Simmons and his defensive performance. But looking at their odds, I mean, somebody asked me this on Twitter the other day. I picked the Sixers, but I told them, I was like, I'm not completely counting out the Hawks having a chance to win this, especially if Embiid wasn't himself and, you know, he's not 100%. That opens the door for the Hawks. And the Sixers are the same team, obviously. When Joel Embiid leaves the game, that's the time for the Hawks to jump on him and really take advantage. So if you're looking at, you know, I'm sure you have your opinions in this team, and you definitely want them to win this series. I would love to see it too, but what do you think their odds are of taking this series, and how have they matched up with the Sixers from your perspective?
Well, you know, Embiid still got torn meniscus in that knee, and as many minutes as he's playing and as hard as he's playing, I just keep thinking that one bad move and he may be done. It's that for serious, sure. Right? I don't wish that. Don't get me wrong, but I've seen enough of these to know that, you know, this is basketball at its highest level, and it takes an extraordinary amount of effort to win playoff games. Absolutely. And so we'll keep a close eye on that. Philadelphia is the number 1 seed for a reason. They've got a lot of nice pieces to go around, but the Hawks have something going. Trae's unguardable. I mean, you could talk about Ben Simmons all you want, but he is a very tough guy to guard if you're 6'10". You know, you might block his shot occasionally, or, you know, trap him and get away with it, but over 48 minutes, he's going to find a way to score and to get the ball to his teammates. He didn't play particularly well in game 2, and he still had 21 and 11. And if we'd have hit our shots, he'd have had 15, 16, 17 assists. So it's not like Ben Simmons stopped him in game 2. We more stopped ourselves. I think game 3 is obviously a very pivotal game in this series. You've got home court by winning game 1. You've got to keep it now. And that means you got to win Friday night and you got to win Monday night. And if the Hawks do that, they're going to have these cats on the run. But to do that, they're going to have to play much, much better than they did in game 2. They cannot turn the ball over like they did in game 2. I think we had 18, 19 turnovers, something like that. Cannot happen in a high-stakes game like this. And we've got to figure out a way to slow Embiid down a little bit. I think we're going to come up with some changes in our coverages for game 3. Can't let him get 40. Even though, it's funny. You look at the box score from games 1 and 2. The point totals for the Philadelphia starters were pretty much the same.
Yeah.
39 to 40, 20 to 22. It wasn't a whole lot of difference. What was different was Shake Milton getting hot. He was like Vinnie Johnson back in the day with the Pistons, the microwave. Yeah. And he just came in. Just nobody saw that coming. Nobody in Philadelphia saw that coming. And he got hot. If he doesn't do that, then the Hawks probably win the game or come close. We were 18 down and came back and got the lead. So Philadelphia knows that this isn't going to be a pushover. And now that they got to come on the road, it could be very, very interesting if the Hawks win on Friday night.
Oh, yeah, totally agree. I mean, this isn't playing the Wizards with having a guy like Westbrook that's going to bail you out and, take 5 threes and miss 4 or 5 of them. And you can't get away with that. Trae Young is a different animal. And as you said, he's almost unguardable at times. And I watched a lot of his points that he scored in game 1 when he had 35. And a lot of those points were just tough threes. I mean, he's just so smart when he kind of puts his mind to when he really wants to attack the lane. I love how many moves he has in his bag, to go to the through the legs, the floaters.
He's got the handle, doesn't he?
He does. He can get to wherever he wants on the court. So I'm with you. The Hawks are going to give them a run for their money. I definitely at least had them winning 2 games in this series, if not more, just because there's so many weapons. That's why I picked him against the Knicks. Shooters everywhere, a star in the making, a defensive anchor in Capella. If we're talking about coverage for Embiid, I think they really have to commit to doubling him more. I don't think this is a guy like Jokic that's going to sling the ball across the court and get 10 assists. I think Embiid's a little more tunnel vision, so that could work in their favor. But as you said, they were close games, until Shake Milton broke out last game. There's an avenue for success there. So definitely with you. And I just wish the best for this team because, being in Atlanta, living in Atlanta and just see how the city has kind of stepped up to support them. There's nothing else like it, being a part of that playoff atmosphere. So I definitely agree with you on that one. But one last thing I wanted to touch on here with you this evening before I let you go is, Trae Young is one of these guys that's ushering in this new generation. And this ties in a little bit with broadcasting and the media side of it, because for years, everybody's hyped up LeBron. Everybody's hyped up, the last generation. Kobe was in that last generation. You're looking at those guys starting to phase out now. They're getting to the end of their careers. And we're into an era now where Trae is the next generation. And Luka, before he got eliminated, John Morant really stepped on the scene this season. And I think people, if you're looking at the media side, you have to take a different approach to how you kind of support and market the league, because there's different characters at work now. And there are teams that haven't won a championship in the past 5 years. No more Warriors, no more LeBron, and there's new guys to cover.
Ain't it great?
I love it. I love it. We were due for a change, and this is the change I think we've needed in the NBA, and especially when we're trying to get this next generation of fans that haven't seen LeBron and Jordan and Kobe, and they're looking for somebody to get into the game with. So I would say that this is a pivotal time for the league, because we're covering people coming into their own, and you're trying to gather new fans, fans that maybe weren't a part of the league 5 or 10 years ago, and you're trying to get them into the fold. So if we're going to talk about maybe your favorite players to watch, Trae Young, I'm going to automatically put him on the list, check him off, favorite players to watch. But if we're looking at guys 25 years old or younger, who would you say are your favorite watches right now when you just kind of stand there in awe of their abilities and what they can do on a basketball court every night?
Yeah. Well, you can't go wrong with Trae and Luca and Ja Morant that you just mentioned, but some of the old heads too are amazing. The Steph Currys of the world with their shooting, and I can honestly say that the skill level of our players today is the greatest in the 75-year history of this league.
Without question.
I mean, the depth with which these kids can shoot it, it's fantastic. And I am a huge fan of the next generation stars. I think that they are building a new breed of fan in a way. It's going to be a fan that's driven by social media. It's driven by streaming. In-arena experiences are different. So I think there's a lot of great things going on with the NBA right now. And the other thing, too, Aaron, about our game, it's a worldwide game. It's not just the United States and Canada. I mean, 25% of our workforce is international. So
cool.
Yeah, it's great. And to see a guy like Jokic win MVP, to see Gobert win Defensive Player of the Year, a guy from Serbia, a guy from France, just tells you the depth and quality of the international game. And that just makes the NBA game that much better, that much more exciting to see different guys do different things and succeed in different ways. I mean, Embiid is like an old school back to the basket center, right? Beat you two at a time. He's not out there shooting threes. He can make a couple, but that's not his game. It's get down and get dirty and get in that paint. So there's a lot of different ways to win, and I love it. I am a huge fan of our game. I'm a huge fan of Trae and our younger players. I think it's great, and I think it's going to usher in a very exciting time. This playoff run is the best thing that's happened to this league in years. New cities, new stars, new teams, new rivalries. It's fantastic. You'll never look at a Hawks-Knicks game the next 5 years the same way.
I was just about to say, that's going to be a rivalry in the making right there.
Because rivalries are made in the playoffs. You're never going to look at Philly and Brooklyn the same if they match up. You'll never look at, say, Phoenix and Utah. Two franchises that a lot of fans didn't even know they were in the league. You'll not look at them the same if they meet head to head in the Western Finals. And this is great. This is great for the NBA.
Absolutely. And you talked about, you just mentioned that some people didn't even know like Utah and Phoenix had teams.
Right.
It made me think of a YouTube video I just watched the other day. Somebody was joking and they're like, nobody even knows who's on the Suns or something like that. It was like a joke on LeBron when he lost. It's like, they don't even know who plays for the Suns. So I love that you touched on that because it's more opportunities for these teams that have spent so many years just being pushed aside and kind of ignored. But one last question to kind of top off our time this evening. It really comes down to who's going to usher in this next era, who's going to lead us into these next few years. I came up with some names. I'm looking at Jokic. I'm looking at Giannis. I'm looking at Luka Doncic. For the face of the league once LeBron retires, there was Michael Jordan. There was Magic. There was Jordan. There was LeBron, Kobe. And now we're kind of like on the tail end of that one. So it's like, who's going to be the next guy that when you think of the NBA, it's like synonymous with like, oh, this guy is the leader. He is the top of the echelon when it comes to, who drives this league. For you, who would that be? I mean, I'm inclined to say Luka, but there's so many people that can take up the mantle.
Yeah. Aaron, it will be borne out with winning. I mean, whoever comes out of this playoff is going to have a leg up in that department. It might be Embiid. It might be, KD and Kyrie. It might be Chris Paul. It might be, and those are older players. And I know you're talking about the younger guys, but winning develops that. It's interesting. And I think the pendulum is swinging back. When Jordan came along, he earned the accolades and he earned that pedestal. There was a lot of playoff failure before he got there. Okay. He had a hard time going through Boston, had a hard time getting past Detroit. Okay. So there was some failure early before MJ became MJ. And that catapulted him into a worldwide figure and took the league to a worldwide stage because of his success. Then you look at a guy like LeBron, who before he ever dribbled a ball in the NBA was a marketing whiz. You know,
Right.
all of these companies were, you know, led by Nike and were showering millions and millions on LeBron before he ever played a game. Before it took him 3 years to win a playoff series and to get to the playoffs. You know, people forget that. But it was he was anointed, you know, the chosen one and all that stuff. But it was a different sort of ascension to the top. Okay, it was really more money driven, and then the performance followed. Whereas Jordan, the performance came first, and the money followed. I think the pendulum is swinging back now. You know, these kids obviously get big contracts, so money is like they're going to get their $200 million contracts. But my point is that it's swinging back to where the superstardom that you're talking about, who are the next generation of stars, is going to be determined by who wins. You know, like Jordan's day. You know, those are the guys that are going to rise to the top, I think. And I think it's very exciting to see. You know,
I do too.
Trae Young looks like the kid who comes over and mows your lawn on Saturday morning, right? And the kids love him because they can relate to him, right?
Good point. Yeah.
I can't relate to LeBron because of his size, right?
He's an alien.
He's a tight end playing basketball. I can't relate to Jordan. Because it's just otherworldly, you know, as a basketball player. But I can relate to Trae. I can relate to Jokic, you know? He's just kind of that goofy big guy that, you know, just kind of doing all these crazy things. I can relate to Luka. I can relate to Ja Morant. You know, these guys look like, you know, guys that I could hang with. Not on the court, but just hang out with, you know, socially. You know, they look like, I'd have fun with Luke. I'd have fun with Ja. Have fun with Trae, you know? And I think that adds to their popularity. So I think the NBA is on the cusp of obviously we're going to crown a new champion, but we're also going to crown a new leader of the next generation.
Yeah, the new face of the league, I think, is around the corner. And, you know, you're talking about guys that are ushering in this league. And I love how you talk about how relatable they are. And, you know, I think about these guys and not just how they play, but how they conduct themselves. And for a lot of these guys, they're great personalities, which I think also helps their case to be a face of the league. Yeah. Luka and Jokic in particular, you know, there's all these screenshots and all these memes out there. You just see them just acting up and being goofy and things like that. So I just love how they approach the game. And they just have so much joy when they play. That's something that stands out to me about those guys. And another reason why I think they're going to be perfect ambassadors for this game in terms of the marketability, in terms of the international influence that you touched on, the international flavors. So cool. And the great league is a great place as a result.
You know, like we have with Bogdanovich, you know, people are just now in Atlanta, just now starting to understand, you know, that we've got a pretty special guy here. And, you know, we haven't been able to really get to know him because of the pandemic, but you know, he's going to be in a Hawks uniform for years to come. And this guy
will have a chance.
Special.
Very special. Absolutely. Well, those are some great topics here. I wish I could talk some more further, but this is going to be the end of our conversation here this evening, Bob. But I thank you again so much for taking your time and getting to pick your mind a little bit from, you know, somebody that's done this on a high level for a long time. It's a very special opportunity. So thanks so much. And I wish you the best as you go forward in your career. I hope you're in that booth for a while longer because it's a joy to hear you in there. I hope the Hogs have a great playoff run here. They hope they continue to do well and all that good stuff. So that's fantastic. So for everybody that's watching this, listening to this, for Business Casual Basketball, I mean, there's some ways you can find us. We have a website, bcbasketball.info, if you want to get involved with us. Listen to our podcast on Apple and Spotify. And then BC Basketball 2 is our Twitter and Instagram handle if you want to check out some of our content for social media. But that's about it for this evening. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your evening here. If you're listening to this podcast, have a great playoff run here as you continue to enjoy this new era of NBA basketball, all these great new players. And hope to see you on the next podcast here as we get into some more NBA analysis. So until next time, guys, have a great evening, and we'll see you again on here real soon.